It's pretty well known that the fastest racers in pretty much any game play those games using a manual transmission, but the actual difference is rarely talked about. So today I decided to test the difference between manual and automatic for everyone out there who's wondering, is it worth it to learn manual in the Crew Motorfest? Let's go. Real quick before I get into the video, if you're looking for a community of racers to play with, join our Discord. There's a link in the description down below. That's also where I do all of my giveaways, and we have every topic in there from the Crew Motorfest, the Crew 2, to Need for Speed Heat, Need for Speed Unbound, everything Need for Speed, and all kinds of other racing games. There's over 14,000 members there, so hit that link and join us. All right, let's get into this. All right, so first let's talk about how I structured these tests. I ran this same exact track with the same exact parts on the same exact car with 10 runs for each type of transmission, 10 runs for manual, 10 runs for automatic, and I recorded the best 3 runs, the best 3 times, and we're gonna compare those. So let's get into the results, and then we can talk about the advantages, the fun, is it worth learning, is it hard to learn, all of that stuff after we look at the results of the test. So the test track is Kyusha Spirit. It's one that I'm very familiar with. It's the one that I test all of my street vehicles on, and it's a course that I'm really consistent on, and I really wanted to have that consistency with the lines that I take and understanding where the good gutter turns are and all of that, just so that the times were as consistent as possible. I realize that when you test cars like this, the time is greatly affected by the driving skills or the driving performance, which has nothing to do with the gearbox at all. So this is like the best way to test it for me, but at the same time, it's still not the perfect scenario. If we could get like an AI driver that drove the course exactly the same every time with a different result based on if it has a manual gearbox or an automatic gearbox, obviously that would be the best. But this is what we've got for now. So let's get into the results themselves. The best 3 times that I was able to record in a manual transmission with this car is a 214.59, a 214.576, and a 215.023. As you can tell, all of those times are within, let's say, 0.5 of a second of each other. But let's move over to the automatic side of things, and as you may have guessed, it's a little bit slower. 216.042, 216.5, and 216.418. These are actually way closer to the manual times than I expected. I thought you would have a significant advantage, especially on this course with the launch, because you can upshift right away in manual and you can't do that in automatic, and I thought all of that wheel spin would equate to more loss in time, but it really didn't. The times are very, very close, within 1.5 seconds. If you look at the best time for manual to 214.59, and the best time for automatic is a 216.0, that's a 1.5 seconds off. That's really, really close on a course that I'm very, very familiar with. I'll be honest, I really was thrown off by how close these times were. I thought manual would have a much greater advantage. Now again, it's just with me driving. Someone who can drive an automatic a lot faster may be able to run a better time than 216, but this test was specifically for the manual versus automatic, and I'm the driver in both scenarios. So let's get into the advantages of manual real quick, and we can talk about a couple other things. The launch is definitely an advantage. As you can tell in these video clips, it's really not that big of an advantage, but you can limit your wheel spin by upshifting, and this is something that actually helps you a lot in the grand races. A lot of people you can see sort of sit still. If you watch some of my daily build videos, you'll notice in the grand races that I launch a lot harder than most of the people in the field, and I think that has to do with manual versus automatic. In addition to that though, you can always be in the right gear to fit the scenario that you're in. For example, gutter turns are sometimes easier to control by being in one gear higher than you should be for that corner, and automatic really doesn't have the ability to know that that's what you want to do. So when you're in automatic, you're always in the gear that's supposed to be giving you the highest torque or the highest acceleration for that particular part in the course, but sometimes you want to be in the gear above, like when you're using gutters to turn. You can also short shift and NOS, which helps gain speed a little bit faster than allowing your RPMs to reach the maximum before shifting. You can shift early and then NOS, and you sort of gain speed. You can watch the speedometer gain speed really, really fast. It also prevents bad NOS usage as well. If you're in manual, you can upshift early and then NOS, and you don't hit the red line like you would if you were in high RPMs and then you NOSed anyway. So there's a lot of advantages in terms of always being in the right gear. In addition to that, you can use your manual transmission for engine braking. This allows for a shorter braking distance because you can use both your car's brakes and the engine to slow you down when you downshift. So when you're going into a corner with a manual transmission, you can double downshift, skipping an entire gear, which then slows your car down a lot faster than if you were to just downshift once, which is what happens in automatic. In automatic, as you slow down and as you're on the brakes, the car will automatically downshift for you, which in turn does give you engine braking, but it's not quite as effective as being able to control it yourself. Now, in addition to that, you can also control how long you're sitting in a gear. Let's say you're coming up to a turn and you're almost there, but your RPMs are also almost at redline. In manual, you can just sit in that gear and redline the car into that gear, but in automatic, it'll shift for you right before the turn, and then when you're in the turn, it has to shift back down because you've slowed down in that turn, and that time shifting back and forth actually does lose you time. It might be tenths of a second or even hundredths of a second, which is not a lot, but over the course of a long race or a race that has a lot of turns in it where this happens, that definitely can make a difference. And so manual is obviously a better choice in those scenarios. Now, all of these differences, if you want to look at the whole picture, all of these differences, each one by themselves is not super different in terms of automatic versus manual. However, when you add all of the things together, you get a much bigger difference at the end of the race. However, with this test, you can see it's not crazy different. It's not 5 seconds off. It's only a 1.5 seconds difference in terms of these tests. Obviously, if I tested a different category or a different race, you're going to see different results. Like a race that's more straight, doesn't have a lot of turns, doesn't have a lot of shift points, those times are going to be actually even closer, and times that have even more turns and even more switchbacks and even more shifting points in the race, those times are going to be a lot farther apart. So you can sort of take my times as just general information, but this is the actual difference. It's very, very slight when it comes to the average racer. So then that brings us to the question, is it even worth learning? So if you want to know if it's worth learning, you really just need to ask yourself 2 questions. The first one is, do you want to get faster? Like, are you trying to get better scores in the summits or better finishes in the grand races? Or are you trying to be faster with your friends? If the answer is yes, then learning manual might be a good idea. The second question you need to ask is, once you start learning it, are you actually having fun doing that? If the answer is yes, then I would say keep going. Now, obviously, fun is very subjective, but personally, fun is a big priority for me in these racing games, and I prefer manual in the crew because it is more fun for me. In Need for Speed Unbound and Heat, I race in automatic because that's more fun in those games, is just to focus on the driving and not have to worry about shifting. But those are a little bit more arcade than the crew, so that could have something to do with it. But whatever it is, manual just seems way more fun to me in Motorfest. And the next thing you might be wondering is, how hard is it to learn? Now, this really depends on your skills, and I'm going to make a recommendation based on that. If you feel like your driving skills are a thing that's holding you back, like if you're having trouble staying on the track, or you're having a hard time putting up good summit scores, or you're not finishing in the top 5 in the grand races very often, then I think you're better off working on your control of your car instead of switching to manual. But if you're finishing in the top 5 regularly, or you can get platinum each week with ease in the summits, and you feel pretty good about your driving skills, then I think you're ready to tackle it, and learning it will actually translate to other racing games as well. So it's a good investment of your time to learn how to drive in manual and to be good at it. You have to be patient though, because it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to switch to manual and then all of a sudden just be faster at the game. It takes a long time to understand manual and to make it sort of this second nature. In the beginning, you're going to be constantly looking at your gauge and making sure when you're shifting and making sure you're not redlining the car and all this stuff. And you're probably going to be stuck in the wrong gear every once in a while, or a lot, as in my case when I was learning. This is something that I absolutely recommend for all players, but it's about when you want to start learning. And for me, I think that it's important to maximize your potential in the automatic category first before you move into the manual, because manual definitely takes a lot more skill to master. Anyways, to sum up the video, the differences are very, very small, and that's why my recommendation is that way. Maximize your potential in automatic first, then move into manual. And when you move into manual, be patient. It's going to take some time. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions about this, or if you have any experience switching from automatic to manual, please share that in the comments, because I think it'll help with other people who are considering switching, and I think it'll be good for the community as a whole. Anyway, you can send me a DM on Instagram, Twitter, or Discord. I read every single message that comes my way. So thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Trigger out.